All right, Isaiah chapter 20. Let's call this one Square Peg for the famous illustration. A square peg into a round hole does not make a great fit. Understanding that does not literally come out of this chapter, I think it illustrates what's going on in this chapter, which is a famous illustration where God will use Isaiah as the prophecy to Israel, or really Judah, as he is going to tell him to walk naked for what is going to turn out to be 3 years as a sign against Egypt and Cush, for the people of Judah to understand that the hope they have put in Egypt and Cush to save them from Assyria is false hope. And so understanding that we can't necessarily blame Judah for becoming desperate to find solutions, but in their desperation, they have begun to reach for solutions that aren't actually a fit with their troubles. As God seems to make clear in verse 3, which says, "Then the Lord said, as my servant Isaiah has walked naked and barefoot for 3 years as a sign and a portent against Egypt and Cush, so shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptian captives and the Cushite exiles, both the young and the old, naked and barefoot, with buttocks uncovered, the nakedness of Egypt. Then they shall be dismayed and ashamed because of Cush their hope and of Egypt their boast. And the inhabitants of this coastland will say in that day, Behold, this is what has happened to those in whom we hoped, and to whom we fled for help, to be delivered from the king of Assyria. And we, how shall we escape?" The first thing that caught my attention, quite possibly, being the simplicity of God's command to Isaiah, something we skipped over in verse 2, where he is going to tell Isaiah, "Go and loose the sackcloth from your waist and take off the sandals from your feet." Something I wouldn't have necessarily interpreted as get naked, but that's exactly how Isaiah took it, the second half of the verse saying, "And he did so, walking naked and barefoot." It's one thing if he misinterpreted the command, but as we read in verse 3, it seems like he literally got it right when verse 3 says, "Then the Lord said, as my servant Isaiah has walked naked and barefoot for 3 years." The first thing that caught my attention was the way in which God didn't have to spell it out to Isaiah for his servant to understand exactly what he meant. And as embarrassing as the command was, he did not resist it or try to reinterpret it into something more comfortable or something that was a better fit for Isaiah. Because the honestly shocking thing that God was calling Isaiah to do was the perfect fit for the illustration that he was trying to make. Something that neither Isaiah nor the people of Judah were likely able to see at the time. And so Isaiah, in resisting the temptation to either reshape or reinterpret God's command into something else, showed the courage to do something that made God's will perfectly clear at the right time. In contrast, Judah seemed to be determined to force a fit between God and those he was not interested in them partnering up with, forming an alliance that we will get a chance to see in chapters 30 and 31. He will describe as an alliance not of his spirit with those who had a reputation for doing wrong, at the very least, insofar as they sought to partner up with Egypt. Reminding me of the way that, whether it's national alliances or something as simple as everyday friendships, ways in which we can be tempted to try to force a fit between our allegiances or our affections and God, in ways that ultimately only make more problems than they solve.